think the nickname Bloody Mary goes so fucking hard. I'd definitely rather be known as Bloody Mary than the Virgin Queen, because what in the purity culture bullshit is that? If you want to know why we call her Bloody Mary, let me tell you a story. The year is 1550, Edward Tudor is the King of England, and he's bad at it because England is in fucking shambles. And this is actually part 2 of Mary's story, so go back and watch the first part if you missed it. But right now in Mary's story, it's Christmas time, and her brother, King Edward, has invited Mary and her sister Elizabeth to the court for Christmas. Edward is a hardcore Protestant, and Mary is a Catholic. So when Mary gets to her teenage brother's court, he decides he's gonna call her on her shit. And he's like, Mary, you need to give up being Catholic or I'm going to fuck you up. And she's like, yeah, okay, take a hike, Ed. But that left a little bit of a sour taste in Mary's mouth, so the next time she was invited back to court, she brought her entourage and she had them all walking in carrying rosary beads. And King Edward is gagged. He is like, for real, you need to cut this shit out or I'm going to disinherit you from England. And Mary's like, oh, okay, listen here, you little freak. Maybe your grandparents were just some people that couldn't read, but mine were a Spanish king and queen, and if you fuck with me again, I'm calling my cousin Chucky, and he is going to take your ass out. Her cousin is Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. And since Spain would have absolutely killed England, Edward just had to be like, okay, fine, you can be Catholic, but stop holding mass. And Mary talked her shit, but then she's like, I don't know, maybe this is too crazy, so she writes to her cousin Chucky and is like, can you come pick me up? I'm scared. But then she gets word that her brother's actually really sick, so she's actually not really in that much danger. And she's next in line of succession, so she's like, LOL, I'll just stay. Mary's obviously a stubborn Catholic, and Edward does not want her to take the throne when he dies. So he disinherits both his sisters, and he leaves the throne to the 15-year-old Jane Grey, his cousin. After a few months of not hearing from her brother, she just assumes he must have gotten over the illness and is leaving her alone. So when he sent her a letter inviting her to court, she's like, okay, everything's well again, I guess I'll go see him. But Mary's really popular. She is the Kim of this Kardashian family. And one of Mary's supporters intercepts her on the journey to go see her brother and is like, girl, no, it's a trap. They're gonna kidnap you, little man is dying and he's trying to put Jane Grey on the throne. And Mary's like, okay, so fuck that little dork, and she goes back to assemble her massive Catholic army. So when her brother dies and he puts her cousin on the throne, Mary rolls out with her 15,000 strong army towards the capital. And just before they get to London, she meets up with her sister, Elizabeth, and her 1,000-person army to join her. Because the girlies are coming and they are defending their inheritance. Keep in mind that England has never had a queen in her own right be able to rule and hold the throne, so Mary walking into this situation is doing it with balls of steel. The government is obviously extremely Protestant now and does not want Mary Tudor on the throne, but with how much support she has from the English people, they have to give in. And through London, she's cheered and celebrated and everyone's pumped because Queen Mary's here. The only ones not pumped are the Protestants. They are straight up not having a good time. But Mary knows her brother's government has been a shit show and she needs to find a way to unite the country and keep it united after she's gone. And she's not really concerned with her cousin Jane Grey that was put on the throne because obviously she's just like a 15-year-old political pawn. But Mary sets her sights on all those crusty shedding snakes that put Jane in that position in the first place, starting with John Dudley. He's gotta go. John Dudley's put to death, she's busting out all the powerful Catholics out of the Tower, and she's reshuffling her government. She needed to do that bad because her dad and her brother were both dog shit at running England, and the economy is in hell. And she sets the groundwork for complete financial reform in England, though most of the benefits from her policies wouldn't be reaped until years later down the road when her sister is queen. Mary's unique in the sense that her mother believed that Mary would become the Queen of England one day, and made sure Mary was trained specifically to rule a country. So Mary approached England's well-being really strategically. She locked down exclusive trade deals in places like Russia and advanced the navigation of the country. Trade's doing better, they're even going to the banks of Africa for trade, like it's lit. And okay, she's doing a good job as queen, but we the people don't want her to forget that first and foremost, she is a woman. So where is your husband and your new baby? We're all getting a little uncomfy with this no clear heir to the throne situation. And she's thrown right back into the same trouble she had when she was a princess trying to find a husband. All these English boys are of too low a status to marry the queen. And we do not trust these foreign princes because they are probably just trying to get to our military. And Mary's Roman emperor cousin is like, what about my son Prince Phil? And Mary looks at his pic and is like, tell him to come through. Because Mary's in her mid-30s now, and she's never been married because her dad and her brother didn't want her creating any heirs that could be a threat to their own thrones. So she was always refused a marriage, even though she had multiple betrothals. And at 36, Queen Mary of England decides she wants to marry the 25-year-old Prince Philip of Spain. And the English subjects are like, okay, hold up, we don't like this. They do not trust bringing a powerful Spanish prince onto the English throne because they feel like Spain is just going to dominate them politically. And the Protestants especially are like, it is about to be open season on our ass. And so sparks the rebellion against Mary. And the Protestant rebels are trying to put Lady Jane Grey back on the throne. And if that doesn't work, they have a backup plan of Sister Elizabeth. Mary's like, fuck, fuck, fuck. Because they're gonna roll up on her in London, and London is where she has the least amount of shooters. So she needs to find a way to rally the troops and protect her and the city. So she gives them a speech to assure them that she will not marry without the consent of the English people. She is married to the realm, and she is the mother of her subjects, first and foremost, always. And the Londoners were like, that's my bad bitch. That's my queen. And they hold off the rebels in the name of Queen Mary. And listen, the first time they tried to undermine Mary and put Jane Grey on the throne, Mary handled it with the stoic composure and intimidation of her mother. She rolled in on England and they all backed down. But this time, she's going to remind the rebels just who her daddy is and that she's her father's daughter. And so she sent for the execution of the rebel leaders, as well as her cousin, Jane Grey, who was their hope to be the queen to replace her. Her sister Elizabeth also seemed to be a little bit involved in this plan, but Elizabeth swore up and down she had nothing to do with it, and as Mary's heir, Mary really didn't want to do anything terrible to her, so she sent her to the Tower of London. Then after a few months in the Tower of London, she was sent on house arrest. And Mary's like, okay, so that last marriage announcement didn't go great. I'm still gonna marry Philip, I just have to find a way to get the peasants on board. And so in April of 1554, they create the Marriage Act. Basically saying, okay, Philip can be the King of England, but he cannot use the troops for Spanish wars, and he can't appoint anyone in the government without the Queen's approval. And if the Queen dies, he's not the king anymore. Everyone seems fine with this, so in July 1554, they meet, and then 2 days later, they get married. Mary is much more into this relationship than Philip is. Philip is like, you're kind of old, but my dad wants me to do this, so whatever. And they had a lovely, relatively small royal wedding where Mary wore a purple and white dress and a gold wedding band. And then a month later, she starts having pregnancy symptoms. Her belly starts to grow, she's missing periods, she has morning sickness, and she feels the baby stir. And Mary is starting the process of bringing England back under the authority of the Pope. And just before Mary goes into confinement to have her baby, a law is passed to name King Philip the regent for the new heir, should anything happen to Mary. Mary goes into confinement 6 weeks before her due date. And Mary lets her sister come off house arrest to witness the birth of England's new heir. And this is a much anticipated baby all across Europe, because keep in mind, it is inheriting two timeless dynasties, the English House of Tudor and the Spanish Habsburg Empire. So on June 1st, she starts cramping, and then like a week went by and nothing happened. And then more time went by and nothing happened. Mary's bloated belly starts to retract back inwards, and now the public is starting to call bullshit on this pregnancy ever being real. They mock the shit out of her, and she eventually has to admit there is no baby, and she mourns the loss of her chance to be a mother, in what was most likely a phantom pregnancy. So in August 1555, she sadly and quietly rejoins the court, and King Philip is the farthest thing from a supportive husband. He humiliates her by going back to fuck around on the continent, and she goes into a very dark depression and throws herself into her work. And she works for God. She starts rolling back all that crazy shit her brother and Thomas Cranmer did. Also reaches out to the Pope to try and reinstate the legitimacy of her parents' marriage. She makes the clergies be unmarried virgins again, and she's also in negotiations with Rome about all of that land her dad had taken from the church and passed out to his rich friends. And most notably, she reinstates the heresy laws, meaning fuck off religious freedom, no more opposition of the Catholic Church. And so the Protestants in England start leaving in droves. By the end of her reign in 1558, over 300 Protestants were put to death, mostly by being burned at the stake, and almost 1,000 of them had just bolted from England altogether. You might be thinking, 300 Protestants died, but that's pretty close to the amount of Catholics that Elizabeth killed. Why do we call her Bloody Mary? The problem is Mary's executions were extremely well documented and used to push the Protestant movement. They literally drew pictures of her victims and put it in a widely distributed book. John Fox's Book of Martyrs, if you want to read it. And most notably, in the book, there is a drawing of Thomas Cranmer being burned at the stake. It's really back and forth with Mary and Thomas Cranmer, in my opinion, because, he ruined her life by granting her parents divorce, and then she ended his life by burning him at the stake. But the image of Cranmer burning as a martyr really gave fuel to the Protestant belief and nailed the coffin shut on Mary's reputation of a bloodthirsty killer and tyrant. And the country is losing faith in Mary at this point. She's got no man, she's got no baby, she's burning old men, and the crops got rained out. It's shit. And speaking of her husband, he comes back. He's now the king of Spain, and he's like, hey, mamacita, hey, queen, I need some troops for our war. Lame, he goes back to Spain, but Mary in that short visit gets pregnant again. But again, her stomach grew for a few months and then shrunk, and then she started getting really sick and really thin. Her household's like, oh shit, she's not pregnant, she's dying. Likely dying of ovarian cancer that had plagued her for years. And by the fall of 1558, Mary put her affairs in order to die. And King Henry would have been gagged to know that his daughters had the smoothest transition of power in 100 years of English history.